Hey folks, when we think about presentation, there's three ways to fish a lake. You can do it out of a boat, you can do it out of a pontoon boat or a belly boat, or you can wade like this. If you're going to wade, here's some of the key things you got to think about when it comes to fishing lakes. Just remember, the most sensitive time in shallow water is early and late in the day, and especially early in the day, because that's where the big fish that you want to catch are going to come into, because they'll use the cover of a lack of sun to come into these shallow areas. This time of the day it's a little more difficult unless we have some kind of ripple like we have here in the backdrop. But when you're fishing a lake from shore, the presentation aspect, let's take a look first at what lines can we use when we're fishing from shore. There's really, I only find two of them that are effective, the floating line or the intermediate, because I'm not looking at depth now. And one of the most common mistakes I see guys do is they're going to want to wade out there and cast to the middle because they assume that all the fish they want to catch, at least the big ones, are out in the middle. Those big fish, folks, are going to be right in here. So when you're wading shoreline, one of the things to remember, never take up residency in a spot where fish cruise. How do you know they're cruising in your lane? They're usually going to be in shallow water. So sometimes it's better to fish on land, fishing the shallow water here first, and be very, very alert to what you see going on in shallow water. Just remember this, trout, when they enter this shallow water zone, they are extremely, extremely sensitive to movement, noise, and predators. So they're always on alert. They're waiting for anything that could mean danger to them, and they'll zip out into deep water where there's cover. So when you're fishing in shallow water, how you move and the way you move in the water can have a lot to do with what we're going to do in here in terms of presentation. So we don't want to make a lot of noise. Just a tip that I learned a long time ago, when you guys put that fly in the water, don't be moving while you're retrieving. Always fish from a standard position, whether you're in a boat or you're wading from shore, because that'll affect your presentation out there, and you create bows in your line as well as slack if you're moving and retrieving. So fish from a standard position, look, be alert to what's going on around you so you're not spooking fish. And remember, this is where they want to be early, because this is where big fish feed. All fish have to come to shallow water to feed because that's where the food is. And if you're out here, sometimes the fish are going to be behind you. So fish this part first, then extend your cast out. And just work very carefully when you're in the shallow water. Next thing, we'll cover what you have to do from a pontoon boat and a belly boat next. Okay, the second way of fishing a lake, folks, has to do with a pontoon boat or a belly boat. And the big advantage to fishing out of these type of craft is that we have mobility. We can move. And a lot of times, when I want to work a shallow shoreline area, I'm always going to be casting in. I can be kicking and moving as I cast in this manner. I can be shooting while I'm working the shoreline, always casting across and moving very slowly. Another advantage that we have from fishing these boats is that if the wind is blowing, you guys want to always put your back to it so you're not drifting away. See, the wind is drifting me sideways here right now, so you can kick very gently and hold yourself in one position. If you have a lake that's really a big lake and you got to cover a lot of water, then it's a little different. You need a boat with a motor and get around that way. But we have advantages to fishing out of a pontoon boat that you don't have if you're wading on shore or whatever. Some lakes you can't get deep enough or reach enough fish by fishing from shore, so these boats offer us another advantage there. So when I'm fishing out here, I'm gonna basically be fishing at top 4, 5, 6 feet. I don't want to fish in real deep water. I want to basically fish that top zone and the second zone down. And so the lines that I would use most of the time in this boat would either be a floater, the camo, or you can use the ghost tip, even a type 2 line that gets down a little deeper. But the main advantage from this boat is that we can cover water, you can move, you don't have to worry about anchoring yourself, because if you're in a boat and you put an anchor down, you're restricted as to where you can go and you lose mobility. But we can move around here in this type of boat, and I think that's a big advantage for fishing still water. And from a presentation standpoint, you just remember that when the wind does blow,
the second zone in a lake that Denny fishes is Zone 2, and it runs from 6 inches down to about 5 feet. This is his favorite zone in a lake, and where he does the majority of his angling.
your fly is going to start here, but eventually it's going to drop down into that second zone. And that's not a bad thing. It is by and far the most effective, the most productive zone on most of the lakes you're going to fish around the country, especially the nutrient type lakes. A lot of times the fish, if you're not seeing them up on top, they'll be laying 3, 4, 5 feet down. And all you need to do when you're not seeing that surface action, make your cast, let that fly drop down, and as you retrieve it, you'll come down into this zone.
A variety of fly lines can be fished in this zone depending upon your choice of flies and the retrieve you want to use. One of Denny's favorite lines for this zone is the clear or camo intermediate. This entire line sinks uniformly down into the zone and allows the fly to be retrieved parallel across it. This keeps the fly in the portion of the water column where you believe fish to be for the longest amount of time.
You want to be pulling parallel across. Let the fish tell you. You don't have to worry about it. They'll tell you if they're taking emerging insects. When you cast and you start retrieving, the strike comes early, they're probably up in this zone. If you get hit more in the middle of the retrieve, it's because you've dropped in that 4 or 5 foot zone. And if you're getting hit at the end of the retrieve, it's because it's on its way up and they're telling you they're looking for emerging insects. Okay folks, these are the flies that I usually use in zone 2 and 3. These are my AP emergers, Stillwater nymphs, and other colors of AP emergers, Calabatus nymphs, all the way down to midge larvae. All of these flies can be fished with the same retrieve, that pull and pause, slow pull and pause about 4 to 6 inches, or the hand twist. But aquatic insect patterns, all of these flies imitate the aquatic insects that rise from the bottom to the top that fish are feeding on. Just remember, there's only 4, mayfly, caddisfly, damsel, and midge. And I can imitate all of those insects with just these patterns. Okay, these are seal buggers. This is the kind of fly that I like to use whenever I'm fishing. Actually, you can fish them from zones 2, 3, and 4. They're very suggestive type patterns. They've got lots of moving, breathing parts in there. On this side over here are our streamer patterns that can be also fished mostly in zones 1 and 2. You can fish them deeper, folks, but I don't find that real effective. Since minnows are found along the shoreline, I like to fish this stuff in shallow using the camo line. I don't think it's a good idea to use a ghost tip or a sink tip line with that fly or with a floater. Okay folks, so if you're going to use the small flies like a midge larva or Calabatus nymph, or for me AP emerger or my Calabatus, any small aquatic insect pattern, the best retrieve to use with that, with a camo line high in the zone 2, is a little pull and pause like this. Just little pulls about 4 to 6 inches, about this speed, or you can hand twist it. Bring it in on a hand twist. The fish will tell you which one they like better, and you can try employ them both and find out which one they like. But those are the basic pulls that I would use when I'm using small aquatic insects versus the bigger stuff, the leeches and the bugger type flies. We're on the Yamsey Ranch property here on Hyde Lake, and this is a very prolific lake to fish. It's not a real deep lake. The area behind me here is probably 15, 18 feet deep, but most of the depths out on this lake are 6 to 8 feet. So this is, for me, a zone 2 area, and so I'm going to use Cortland's camo line for this situation. It's a clear intermediate, as we've talked about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fish a small aquatic insect. I may go with a seal bugger and fish top and let it drop down. Since these fish, for the most part, are only going to be in that 3, 4, 5 foot area, I want to keep my fly at or above them. If I use a seal bugger or a leech pattern, something that is a bigger fly that can be fished in different zones, including type 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this kind of pull right here. It's about a foot long, moving in this manner. Sometimes you want to slow it down if the water's really cold. We'll do this. Make sure that you're holding in one spot, never drifting into your cast. That's a major no-no on lakes. Remember that, because if you move into your cast, you create slack and it screws up your presentation. But this type of pull is very consistent with bugger and leech type flies. But the versatility of this line, I can move parallel through the zone. If I drop it down, I'll get those fish a little deeper. You'll have to explore. Just remember, as you're in shallow water, in 5, 6 feet of water, down to 8 feet is still relatively shallow. That condenses fish into a real tight zone, so you really only have 1 and 2 zones, and rarely do you even have to worry about that third one. So that's basically what we're going to do here this afternoon, and we're going to try to see if we can get these fish either up high. I'll let them dictate, but because I'm not seeing any fish working on top, I know that they're down a little deeper. So let's get down and probe those different zones and find out. May only have to go to a couple flies, but I know that one of the 2 of them is going to work. were fishing in just below that top zone at about 4 feet of water, maybe 3 feet down from the surface. This fish took fairly early in the retrieve. It's a nice big kamloop rainbow here. Whole key, folks, is just keeping that fly in the zone. Looks like about 23, 22 inches. Nice fish though. Nice kamloop. Getting back in the water.